Welcome to the Sci-Fi Evolution channel. They laughed while the Zelians starved. Then one Earthling offered to share his food with her. Before we dive into the narrative, please leave a quick comment and let me know where you are watching this video from. Your opinion is really valuable to me. The Stellarion Galactic Academy was the most respected educational institution in the Vega Alliance. Its shining silver spires towered against the violet sky of Etheria, a symbol of knowledge that attracted the brightest minds from across the galaxy. Among the students was Zyla, the first Solaris admitted to the academy. Zyla sat alone in the noisy dining room, her thin blue fingers trembling as she looked at the food in her tray. 3 weeks have passed since her arrival, and she has lost almost 15% of her body weight. The nutritious pasta provided to the students was insufficient to maintain it. The body was designed for the dominant species in the Alliance, mainly Virians, Thorians, and Nexians. However, it contained substances that were slightly harmful to her physiology, which originated in her solar system. She was moving the food around the plate with her utensils, her eyes dimming with every passing moment. The Academy administration dismissed her concerns about her diet, viewing them as adaptive challenges that she must overcome if she wants to prove her worth to the scholarship. After all, no exceptions were made for anyone, especially for such a new species in interstellar politics as the Solaris. In the center of the dining room, a group of Virians watched her with amusement. Their silvery, scaly skin reflected the light as they whispered to each other, occasionally bursting into what was considered laughter in their culture. Clicks echoed through the hall. "Look at Solaris, trying to eat again," they said. Drext, the self-proclaimed leader of the group, gave her a week to either leave or face starvation. "The administration shouldn't have accepted her," Wayland added, his dorsal ridges swollen in disdain. Solaris was hardly a space species. What could they contribute to the Alliance? His taunts were cut short when Mason Reed, the only Earthling student at the Academy, entered the dining room. Earthlings were even newer to the galactic arena than Solaris, having achieved FTL travel just 15 years ago. Mason was a unique case. He was accepted to the Academy not through the usual channels, but as part of a diplomatic initiative between Earth and the Vega Alliance. He noticed a blue-skinned girl sitting alone every day since her orientation, and she was getting noticeably thinner every week. He had heard rumors about her physiological incompatibility with a standard meal plan, but was too shy to approach her. "I get it," Mason said, his expression thoughtful. "I'm sorry to hear that, but, there are ways around it. I've been doing this for years." "Really?" asked Zyla, her eyes widening in surprise. "Yes, I found a way to make the formula work for me. It's not easy, but it's possible." "How?" asked Zyla, genuinely curious. "I have developed a special diet that allows me to consume a standard formula without any side effects. It's a bit of a hassle, but it's worth it." "I see," Zyla said, her face thoughtful. "I have to try. Thanks for the advice." "Of course," Mason replied. His smile was warm. "I'm always happy to help. And if you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." "I will," Zyla said, her voice sincere. "I appreciate that." Mason's jaw tightened. He reached into his bag and pulled out a sealed container. "That's what I thought. Here, try this. This is from my personal supply from Earth. No zirconium compounds. I promise." Zyla hesitated, her gaze darting between Mason and the container. "Why are you sharing your food with me? We are not fellow tribesmen or study partners. Because where I come from, we don't let people starve if we can help," Mason said simply. "Besides, I've read about the physiology of Solaris. Your people can process most of Earth's products without any problems. Our planets have developed surprisingly similar biochemical building blocks." Despite their great distance, Zyla carefully opened the container and found a variety of dried fruits, nuts, and what appeared to be a protein bar. She took a dried apricot and put it in her mouth, and the effect was immediate. Her eyes cleared, and the marks on her temples began to glow softly purple. "It's delicious," she said with relief. "How did you know?" Mason admitted. "I wasn't sure, but I studied xenobiology in my spare time. That's why I applied to the academy." The Virians in the dining room noticed the interaction and watched with growing disapproval. Drext, in particular, seemed agitated by the Earthman's intervention. He spoke loudly enough for his voice to be heard. "It seems the primitive species are forming an alliance." Mason heard the remark, but decided to ignore it, focusing on Zale. He ignored the other students, knowing that they were just jealous because they had never had to adapt to new circumstances in their lives. Zyla continued to eat, her strength returning with each bite. This act of kindness will be remembered by everyone. The charter stipulates that hunger is a prerequisite for education, and the scales of the Virians have turned dark purple from your rude sarcasm. Your actions only demonstrate that your species is not yet ready for full membership in the Alliance, which is still evaluating your suitability. In my world, sharing food with a hungry person is considered a fundamental act of decency. However, you Earthlings consider yourself exceptional because you have evolved faster than most other species, but you are centuries behind the Virians in terms of technology and knowledge. Even though Mason was shorter than Drext, he showed no fear and smiled, which puzzled Virian. Mason was right about one thing. We are indeed lagging behind in many areas, but we are also working tirelessly to catch up. While you were perfecting your FTL drives, we were working on something else. What could that be? Asked Drext in a patronizing tone. Adaptation, Mason replied. People thrive on challenges. We evolved in a world with predators that could tear us apart, diseases that nearly wiped us out, and extreme temperatures that could freeze or boil us alive. We didn't have a stable environment like Feridia, so we had to adapt or die. The cafeteria fell silent as students of various species watched the confrontation with interest, and Mason continued, gesturing toward Zyla, who had evolved in an environment with solar radiation storms that kill most species. They have developed cellular regeneration abilities that scientists are still studying. So before you talk about who deserves to be here, consider that different paths of evolution lead to different results. Drext's companions shifted uncomfortably, but Virian remained adamant. Solaris' inability to adapt to our dietary standards is remarkable, but it proves nothing other than your lack of understanding of basic biology. A new voice chimed in, and everyone turned to see Professor Nerali, the head of xenobiology at the academy, approaching their table. The Turanian professor blinked her 4 eyes in turn, watching the scene. Professor Drext immediately straightened up, his scales changing color to a more neutral one. We were just explaining the academy's customs to new students. Professor Drext's tone suggested that she wasn't convinced, as it sounded like you were demonstrating remarkable ignorance in the field of interspecific biochemistry, which is worrying for a third-year xenobiology student. She turned to Zyla, her expression softening. Student Zyla, I would like to offer my sincere apologies for the confusion related to your dietary requirements. We have recently learned about the difficulties you are facing, and we deeply regret that we did not resolve this issue sooner. The standard meal plan is not suitable for your unique physiology, and this was an oversight on our part. Zyla's eyes widened in surprise when she heard this. Thank you for bringing this to our attention, Professor. How did you find out about this situation? Professor Kale explained that Mason, a student in your class, submitted a detailed analysis of the biochemical compatibility of Solaris and Earthlings to the department. He also submitted an official request for accommodation regarding your meal plan, referring to Section 14.3 of the Alliance's Equal Educational Opportunities Act. Mason shrugged when Zayla looked at him, as if to say, I told you so. Professor Keel added, Immediately, the canteen will provide meals that will be adapted to the needs of the Solaris. As for you, student Drext, I'm expecting a 5,000-word essay on the biology of Solaris within 2 weeks. Reflecting on the moral aspects of biochemical discrimination in educational environments, Drext's complexion took on a pale hue. "Indeed, Professor," he replied. When Professor Kale left and the Virians retreated, Zayla looked at Mason with a newfound admiration in her eyes. "Did you do this for me?" she asked. "Why is that?" Mason smiled as he continued to eat his lunch. "Because that's what people do," he replied. "We identify problems and try to solve them. Moreover, I thought that if I stay here for the next 4 years, I might make at least one friend." Zyla's features radiated a warm golden glow. "I would like to be your friend," she said. From that day on, Mason and Zayla became inseparable. Their friendship has developed into a deep bond that will change the Academy's approach to interspecies interactions. By sharing his knowledge of Earth cuisine with Zayla, he helped her understand the complex social structures of the Academy. In turn, she helped him navigate the dietary options available in the cafeteria. Their connection did not go unnoticed by others. Some students, following Mason's example, began to challenge the established traditions that had governed the Academy for a long time. Others, especially those belonging to more conservative groups such as the Virians, looked with concern at their growing influence. 3 months after their initial collaboration, Mason and Zayla were preparing for the Academy's most difficult exam, the Xenoscience Practical Exam. This rigorous test required students to demonstrate their knowledge of alien biology, technology, and cultural practices in a high-pressure environment. "I'm still not sure about the Nexians' respiratory system," Mason admitted as they studied in the library. "Their tracheal structure seems inappropriate for their evolutionary environment." Zyla's fingers danced across her data tablet, displaying a 3-dimensional model of the Nexian anatomy. "That's because you think in terms of continuous evolution. The Nexians have gone through a period of rapid change. About 3,000 years ago, there was a period of self-directed genetic modification. Their current respiratory system is partially constructed." Mason whistled softly. "It would have been useful to know earlier. No wonder I couldn't figure it out naturally." "Information can be found in additional texts," Zyla pointed out, gently teasing him. "Maybe if you spent less time petitioning the administration on behalf of other students, you'd have time to read them." She was referring to Mason's growing reputation as an advocate for minority species in the Academy. After his successful petition on nutritional conditions for Solaris and Denarians with ammonia respiration, students from other species began to approach him with their own concerns, such as environmental adjustments, altered testing procedures, and more for time-lapse crowns. "Someone has to do it," Mason replied with a shrug, "and apparently no one else thought of it." "To continue," a voice said from behind them. They turned around and saw that Vila, the Virian who was part of Drext's group, was standing awkwardly at their table. "Can we help you?" Vila asked formally, her posture becoming a little tense. "I feel unusually indecisive," she said. "I want to inform you that some of us have tried to resolve these issues in the past, but the administration is resisting change." Mason and Zyla exchanged surprised glances. "Have you tried to help other species at the Academy?" asked Mason, not trying to hide his skepticism. "No, not publicly," Vila admitted, her scales turning a more subdued blue, which is a sign of shame in the body language of the Virians. "Our social structure rewards conformity and punishes deviation, but some of us recognize the unfairness in the system," she said, placing a data crystal on their desk. "This contains research on biochemical compatibility between alliance species over the past 50 years. It includes some data that is not available in the Academy's standard database. This information may be useful for your exam preparation." Before any of them could respond, Vila continued, "Drext and his followers represent a conservative faction among our people, But they don't speak for all Virians. Some of us recognize that the future of the Alliance depends on genuine cooperation, not just assimilation. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Mason and Zayla to ponder this unexpected turn of events. Mason said, "I guess we shouldn't judge an entire species by its loudest representatives." Zayla took the data crystal and examined it with interest. Indeed, there may be more potential for change in the Academy than we initially thought. They spent the next few hours reviewing the information provided by Vila and uncovered valuable insights into the biological intricacies of the various Alliance species. The data crystal contained not only scientific data, but also the personal experiences of students who faced difficulties due to the Academy's standardized approach to education. As the ambient lighting in the library dimmed, signaling the approach of curfew, Zayla looked up from her studies with a thoughtful expression on her face. "Mason, I've been thinking about something," she said. "The Xenoscience practical exam is designed to be done individually, but there is no explicit prohibition on collaboration in the rules." Mason raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What's on your mind?" Zayla explained her idea that the exam itself could be wrong. In real field work on Xenoscience, diverse teams are crucial because different species perceive and process information in different ways. Solaris can detect radiation levels that humans would not be able to, while humans can notice environmental patterns that Solaris would miss. Instead of competing with each other, they should work together as a team. Mason agreed with this point of view, and they began discussing how to incorporate this change into the exam process. "We started by demonstrating the excellent results achieved through the cooperation of Interpi," concluded Zayla, "and this was a practical demonstration of the very principles that the Academy claims to support." Mason smiled. "That's fantastic, Zayla," he said, "but it's going to take more than just the two of us to make a convincing argument." Zayla's gaze shifted in the direction Vila had gone, and she said, "We already have potential allies that we haven't considered." The day of the Xenoscience practical exam arrived, and a mixture of excitement and awe filled the Academy as students gathered in the vast examination hall. A circular chamber with transparent walls revealing the purple sky of Etheria. The examination booths were arranged in a circle. Each of them was designed to create a separate space for students to complete their individual assignments. Mason and Zayla entered the room together, immediately noticing that not only the students of the Academy were present, but also a gallery of observers, representatives from various worlds of the Alliance, who had come to witness this year's performance. The stakes were higher than they expected. Professor Kale stood in the center of the room, her four eyes scanning the assembled students with practiced detachment. "Greetings, students," she said. "Today you will demonstrate not only your theoretical knowledge, but also your ability to apply it in scenarios that simulate real galactic field work. Each of you has been assigned a specific examination booth adapted to your type and academic interests," she continued. She paused, her gaze briefly lingering on Mason and Zale. "The exam will start in exactly 10 minutes. Use this time to prepare yourself." Kale's eyes widened slightly in surprise, the Turanian equivalent of amazement. She looked around the gallery. Observers from the Alliance followed the unexpected turn of events with keen interest. "This is very unusual," she said, lowering her voice. "The exam is designed to assess individual abilities. Professor Mace's point of view is correct, but the real world doesn't always work that way. When we face unforeseen challenges, we rely on diverse teams, as different species bring unique strengths." Prix, the crystalline denarian, stepped forward. As they spoke, the surrounding light refracted through their translucent bodies, creating a harmonious chorus of colors. "People are telling the truth, Professor. My kind can detect energy frequencies that no one here can perceive, but we can't process visual information on the same spectrum as most people. Complementary abilities are the cornerstone of effective Xenoscience." Professor Kale seemed to be considering their argument when there was a commotion on the other side of the room. Drext and several others were involved in a heated discussion. The Virians were approaching rapidly, their scales turning into aggressive patterns. Drext said loudly, "This is unfair. They seek to undermine the entire exam process. Individual merit has been the cornerstone of the Academy's evaluation for 7 centuries." Silence fell in the room as students and observers watched the confrontation. Mason noticed an elderly Nexian observer with intricate ceremonial markings indicating a high government position, who leaned forward with obvious interest. Professor Kale raised her hands to steady herself. This is not the time or place for such a debate. However, a resonating voice came from the gallery, and the elderly Nexian stood up. "I think this is exactly the time and place." Supreme Chancellor Morn of the Vega Alliance approached them, his elongated form drawing attention. The Chancellor nodded, his eyes sparkling with approval. "I agree, Mason. We must embrace diversity and use it to our advantage. The Council has been discussing this issue for a decade, and the time has come to act. Let's work together to find a solution that benefits everyone." The Chancellor's expression was thoughtful, which is a sign of deep reflection in Nexian physiology. He made a bold statement. "You, a young Virian," he said to Drext, "are leaning towards the traditional approach of individual assessment." Drext stood straight, his scales forming a formal pattern. "The Academy has been producing the best minds of the Alliance for centuries using these methods," the Chancellor continued. "Changing them to accommodate new species will lower our standards and weaken our scientific community." "I understand," the Chancellor said neutrally. He took a long pause, during which everyone in the examination hall seemed to hold their breath. Finally, he turned to Professor Kale. "I propose an experiment," he said. "Let's continue with both approaches, the traditional individual exam for those who prefer it, and this new collaborative method for volunteers. The results should be instructive." Professor Kale hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. "As you command, Supreme Chancellor. We will need to adjust the exam criteria accordingly." "You have 30 minutes, the Chancellor announced, returning to his seat in the audience. The professor and her team quickly adjusted the exam procedures. Students across the room engaged in lively discussions, some approaching Mason and Zayla's growing group with curiosity, while others gathered around Drext, reaffirming their commitment to traditional methods. As a result, 15 students representing 11 different sports joined the joint team, while the remaining 200 students continued the individual exam. "It was a new approach," Zayla whispered to Mason, as they were escorted into a larger exam room reserved for their group. "The Academy has never allowed such a departure from established procedures before. Sometimes it's enough for one person to say that things could be different to overturn centuries of tradition," Mason replied with a smile. "Moreover, I think the Chancellor has been expecting something like this for a long time. Did you see how quickly he intervened?" Vila, who was watching the situation, said, "Indeed, I saw it. He seemed very encouraged by this new approach. I got closer as I followed them. The Alliance Council has been at an impasse over integration policy for quite some time. Traditionalists insist on assimilation when new species fully meet the established standards of the Alliance. Progressives, on the other hand, advocate adaptation, suggesting the evolution of our systems to accommodate diverse needs and points of view. The Academy serves as a microcosm of this broader debate." Mason realized loudly. "That's right," Vila confirmed. "This exam may have consequences that go beyond our academic career." The revised test turned out to be even more difficult than the original version. Instead of isolated situations, the team was faced with a complex interconnected simulation of a newly discovered planetary system with multiple biospheres, presenting new scientific and ethical dilemmas. The team quickly divided the tasks based on individual strengths rather than species. Crystal, and the other Denarian focused on analyzing the energy. Their bodies literally glowed in different hues as they processed the radiation data. The crowns, with their enhanced temporal perception, were able to quickly process rapid sequences of events that would be blurry to other species. Xyla and two other scientists were mapping the biochemical interactions of the sun. Their innate sensitivity to molecular structures proved invaluable. Mason acted as a coordinator. His human adaptability allowed him to integrate information from different perspectives. At first, it was a chaotic mess with 15 different communication styles, but they quickly developed a common language and methodology. Meanwhile, the individual examinees worked in isolation, each faced with a scaled-down version of the simulation adapted to the capabilities of their species. Hours passed as both groups progressed through the exam. In the observation room, the Alliance's observers looked on with growing admiration, taking copious notes. The Supreme Chancellor remained silent, his ancient eyes fixed on the joint team with an incomprehensible expression. "The final sequence begins," announced the dispassionate voice of the examination system. "Planetary destabilization has been detected. It was extremely important to find a solution within the allotted time." The screens of the joint team were filled with disturbing data as they watched the simulated planet undergo catastrophic tectonic shifts due to interaction with a gravitational anomaly. Millions of simulated life forms were on the verge of extinction unless a solution was found. Vela immediately suggested following standard protocol and evacuating the population. However, the population was too large and scattered for a complete evacuation within the available time. The Nexian contingent has prioritized the preservation of knowledge and cultural artifacts, including a young Nexian named Lit. However, this approach involved a significant loss of lives, Mason realized. The data furrowed an eyebrow. "There's something we're missing," he said. "Gravity patterns don't match any natural phenomenon I've encountered." Xyla walked over to him, her eyes scanning the data quickly. "You're right," she said. "These are not random fluctuations. There is a pattern here that suggests a human-made cause." The team was encouraged by this realization. If planetary instability was caused by human intervention, Mason said, it could potentially be reversed. The Denarians quickly began simulating energy frequencies that could disrupt the anomaly, while the Crowns calculated precise timing sequences for the intervention. "We need a delivery system," Mason continued. "Something that can target gravitational focal points with enough precision to neutralize artificial frequencies." Vela's scales trembled with excitement as she proposed the Virian terraforming technology. "We've developed it. To ensure planetary stability during the colonization process, we could modify it to create opposite frequencies. Solar and biochemical catalysts can enhance the spread through the core of the planet." Xyla added, "Our compounds are specifically designed to enhance energy signatures in mineral-rich environments." While they were working on integrating these diverse technologies into a single solution, Mason noticed how naturally they fell into joint innovation. The unique knowledge and perspectives of each species have become crucial in solving this problem. When the final sequence was completed, the evaluation system announced that both groups had achieved successful results. Individual participants chose evacuation protocols, saving a significant part of the simulated population. However, the joint team saved the planet, saving its inhabitants. However, their entire civilization and ecosystem were under threat. The room exploded with discussion when the results were announced. Professor Kale called for calm, but the excited conversations continued until the Supreme Chancellor rose from his seat again. "Remarkable results," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. Both approaches demonstrated skill, but they led to completely different results. He came down from the gallery, heading for the center of the room. "The people who passed the test proved themselves admirable within their understanding. effectively applying established procedures and achieving what most would consider a successful outcome, saving lives, if not its context. The Chancellor addressed the joint team. However, this group has accomplished something much deeper by combining their different points of view and abilities. They recognize patterns that would have gone unnoticed by any single species. They have challenged the assumptions that have guided our scientific community for generations, and in doing so, they have saved not only lives, but an entire world. There was silence in the hall as the Chancellor spoke. The Vega Alliance was founded on the belief that diverse civilizations can achieve more when they work together. However, over time, we may have forgotten what true diversity actually entails. It's not just the presence of different species in the same space, each adapting to the dominant culture. It is an active inclusion of diverse ways of perception, thinking, and being. He gestured to Mason and Zayla, who shared their food with a hungry Solaris. It wasn't just a simple act of kindness. It was an example of true diversity, where different beings come together to support each other and create a better future for everyone. Solaris didn't have to adapt to a diet that was slowly killing her. The system had to adapt to accommodate its natural physiology. Drex stepped forward, his scales now a muted green. "Hello, Chancellor," he said respectfully. "I respectfully disagree with your suggestion that we should abandon centuries of tradition based on a single exam. The Academy's methods have produced generations of leaders and scientists of the Alliance," he admitted. "Indeed," the Chancellor admitted, "and I'm not suggesting we drop anything. Rather, I suggest expanding our understanding of excellence. The usual methods will continue for those who thrive under them, but we must also create a place for collaborative efforts that leverage our unique strengths. As Professor Keel put it, the Academy should create a parallel path for collaborative research." The Chancellor announced that both traditional and innovative approaches to education, with their respective curricula and assessment methods, will be equally recognized as valid paths to graduation. This announcement caused a wave of enthusiasm in the audience, and Professor Kale was momentarily stunned, but quickly recovered. "As you requested, we will immediately start developing a new track." When the official procedures came to an end, the students gathered in small groups to discuss the consequences of the announcement. Mason found himself surrounded by members of his collaborative team, all eager to explore the possibilities. "We made history today," said Vila, her scales shimmering with excitement. "We've changed the future of the Academy," Zyla agreed, her eyes shining. "Most importantly, they have demonstrated a different way of approaching problems that values diversity." Mason smiled, realizing the potential of this new approach. Before he could respond, Mason noticed Drex approaching the group. Virian's body language was hesitant, his scales shifting in uncertain patterns. "Drex," Mason formally addressed Virian. "I'd like to talk to you." The group fell silent as Mason stepped forward to meet Drex. "What can I do for you?" Drex's scales quivered with what seemed to be concern as he replied. "I want to admit that your approach has shown promise." Mason looked at Zyla, who was standing next to him, and said, "I think Zayla is the one who deserves this recognition." Drex turned to Zyla and replaced his scales with a formal pattern of respect. "Zyla," he said formally, "I apologize to you for my behavior." Zayla replied, "Thank you, Drex, for recognizing my value. I appreciate your apologies." Her marks glowed softly as she considered his words. "Apologies accepted, Drex of Viria. Perhaps something can be learned from this exchange, too." Drex hesitated before adding, "The Supreme Chancellor has asked me to join the Student Advisory Committee to develop a new joint track. I believe that your perspectives will be valuable if you want to participate." Mason and Zyla exchanged surprised glances. "We'd be honored," Zyla replied formally. When Drex left, Mason shook his head in amazement, saying, "Well, that was unexpected." "Not at all," Vila replied, her scales reflecting a hint of amusement. Drext is multifaceted, but he is not devoid of intelligence. The winds of transformation were sweeping through the Alliance, and Drext was astute enough to navigate them. Zyla turned to Mason and said, "I got a message from the Solaris Diplomatic Council. We were glad to hear about your joint approach to the exam this morning. We have invited you both to speak at the next summit of the Alliance for interpersonal education." Mason raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Both of us? But I'm just a first-year student. I don't have any diplomatic status. But you have something more valuable." The voice came from behind us. We turned around to see Professor Kale approaching. He said, "You have demonstrated the practical value of the human perspective in the affairs of the Alliance. The human talent for adapting to new situations and recognizing patterns in a variety of information sources is remarkable." The professor's eyes blinked in turn, which is a sign of respect in Tuluran culture. "The Academy has granted you both a special research status to further develop your joint methodologies, and I am authorized to inform you that your nutrition exchange initiative has been approved. The Academy has implemented a new policy regarding the biological needs of all living beings. From now on, all biological needs will be satisfied." After Professor Kale left, Mason turned to Zyla with a smile. "Not bad for a couple of primitive species, huh?" Zyla's expression showed her happiness. "Indeed. I must stress that none of this would have happened if you hadn't said those simple words that first day." "Come and have lunch with me," Mason said. It seemed like the right thing to do. He explained that where he came from, they didn't let people starve if they could help. And it was a simple principle that had profound consequences when applied consistently. The story of a man who shared his food with a hungry alien quickly spread throughout the Academy and beyond. It has become a symbol of a new approach to interspecific relations based not on assimilation to dominant norms, but on mutual respect and understanding. Acceptance and respect for biological and cultural differences formed the basis of a collaborative path that quickly gained popularity among students from different backgrounds, especially those newly accepted into the Alliance of Worlds. Research teams made up of people from different species began to generate ideas and innovations that had eluded more homogeneous groups for centuries. 6 months after the groundbreaking exam, Mason and Zayla stood on the observation deck of the Academy's tallest tower, watching the purple sunset over Etheria. The sprawling campus below has undergone significant transformations. The new structures were designed to meet the environmental needs of different species. The gardens produced food from 100 different worlds, and the students communicated freely in common areas. Sometimes Mason still found it hard to believe how much had changed. He said, leaning on the railing, "It all started with a simple lunch." Zyla stood next to him, her blue skin glowing softly in the fading light. "Mason, it's not just food. It is a recognition of a fundamental need and a commitment to address it directly, rather than leaving others to suffer for the sake of tradition." She turned to him, her expression serious. "In my culture, we say that the greatest journeys begin with the smallest steps. Your willingness to share your food was such a step, but its impact went far beyond what any of us could have imagined." Mason smiled, remembering the scared and hungry girl he had first encountered in the cafeteria. She turned into a confident scientist, respected throughout the Academy for her biochemical ideas and diplomatic skills. "We're a good team," he said simply. "Indeed," Zyla agreed. "And I believe that we have even more to do together." When the last rays of the violet sun disappeared over the horizon, they stood in comfortable silence, two people from completely different walks of life, united by a common goal. Different civilizations have found common ground in the most basic human act, the act of sharing food with those in need. In the vast dining room below, students from different alliances sat at tables together and shared food. Each species has adapted its eating habits to accommodate its unique biological needs. What was once a rigidly divided and ridiculed world has become a place of curiosity and mutual respect. It wasn't a transformation overnight. Centuries of tradition can't be changed in a day. But it was a start. And sometimes the beginning is enough to change the universe.